This is Kate Baconsale. You're listening to Baconsale.
Rows and flows of Blondie's hair. The Sarge is mad, should Beetle care? There's speaking animals everywhere. The therapist is away. Garfield hates the morning sun. Kathy's mad at everyone. So many things that Hob had done when Calvin got to play. I've laughed out loud at Far Side cows from Foxtrot and Zits and Crankshaft somehow. Let's all take a memory trip to the funny pages and comic strips.
Wow. Kent, did you really just do Joni Mitchell? A Joni Mitchell parody of Both Sides Now and turn it into comics?
So I was like, what's an intro I can do? And I can't think of one. Far Side. Both sides. Both sides now. Far Side cows. That's the way my mind works.
That's how parody works. Kent.
Okay. I'm learning something.
Welcome to Baconsale. I'm Joel.
I'm Kent.
And I'm Zack.
We'd like to thank you for listening to our last show, our summer movie preview, where we talked about movies that are actually maybe possibly coming out this summer. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Over on Twitter, we had a couple of listener who submitted their lists, including Ryan Farron, who said, glad to have the summer preview back. Movies movies I'll make an effort to see. Quiet Place 2, In the Heights, Black Widow, and Coda.
Hey, you went someone over within the Heights. How fun.
Movies
with Coda.
Here we go.
Movies I'll avoid, in parentheses, sees your list.
Wait, the good or bad list, or both?
See,
I think he's agreeing with us.
I'm just saying, just see your lists. It's
No one
all
makes
of them.
lists.
No one wants to see Space Jam 2.
Nobody.
Then Drew Cutler says, my list of movies I least and most anticipated this summer are least favorite, Space Jam 2, Cruella, and Peter Rabbit 2. Most, anything in theaters. I want to go to theaters again. So, I mean, that's really just, that's a low bar to hit. I agree with them on their lists. I want to see movies too. Should be fun. I'll finally watch stuff.
Should be fun.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about today. What are we talking about today, Zach?
I got to be honest with you, Joel. I
sang about it.
I don't know what's happening.
I sing about
because I don't know what you
Okay.
just sang about. I didn't know the song. I didn't know the topic.
Wait, you didn't know the song?
No. We're talking about comic strips.
actually.
Sunday comic strips.
Yeah, comic strips.
These are like Batman, right?
What is a comic strip, Zach?
It's
Where would you go ahead?
I thought of a clown doing
No, hey, family friendly. Family friendly.
I guess this is the thing in the paper that you see on the floor in the
what's
bathroom.
the paper?
It's the thing that they
Are you
print
a bird?
now once a month.
The paper on the floor.
Gather around, children.
I
Let me tell you
don't
a
know.
story.
Listen to Father Joel.
Yes.
Back in my day, the news was not on a computer screen. No.
No.
They would print it onto pieces of paper, fold those paper up, make underage children get up at the crack of dawn to throw them at your porch. And then you would open them up, and there would be headlines on the front of these newspapers that would tell you stories about the real world. But the smart children would look in the corner and see where the comics section was.
Indeed.
And flip open to that and enjoy at least a half hour of goodness.
So good.
Is this like you remember those highlights magazines? The only thing you ever did was you looked at the find the hidden items
Those
page.
were in waiting rooms.
Yeah, it's like that, but with news.
Before phones.
Yes.
But guys, can we talk about phones? Phones are great.
No.
But with comics, really, it's funny because when we were talking about doing this show, we were like, well, why would we do comic strips right now? Like, is there anything happening in the comic strip world? And I said to you guys,
Is there ever?
The longer we wait to do this category show, the less relevant this will become.
Well, this is definitely one of those shows that we're not getting any new listeners from.
No.
I don't feel, because Joel, you and I, and I feel like many of our listener, this is something that appeals to us because it's something we grew up with. It's something the paper's here.
This is a nostalgia trip.
Yeah, and you'd open it up and you'd read maybe half of the comics because maybe only half were good.
Half hour is probably generous. I probably burned through these in like 10 minutes.
And with every meal, I'd have the newspaper open like I was smart, but I was really just reading the funny pages.
The funny pages, exactly.
And Zach, you have no idea what kind of life this evening is.
You really never read the comics in the newspaper?
I mean, I've seen them.
But you never sought them out.
No. I mostly saw that, like, I guess I saw them in the paper and I was like, I don't get that joke. Or I saw them like a clipping on someone's fridge. And I'm like, okay.
Ziggy.
That's what they call me.
Pickles.
I like them. They're very good.
So these have
Zits.
no
I hate them.
no recollection here, no knowledge whatsoever.
Nothing.
But then
Wow.
if we were to say something like Garfield.
That's a TV show.
Yeah. But you know Garfield.
From
or Charlie Brown.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
from the TV show.
Spider-Man.
From the TV show.
Dennis the Menace.
From the TV show.
Mary Worth.
What?
So
Miss Butterworth's sister, right?
This word association thing is weird. Why?
Yeah.
So we are
They all make sense somehow.
we have a series of categories we're going to be talking about, but before we do, I want to get into a little bit of the history of comics.
Oh yeah, please do.
All the way back to the Biblia Pauperum.
What?
Oh my word! Please say that again.
The Pauper's Bible.
Okay, that's
this
easier.
was back in the later Middle Ages, which is it's all the Dark Ages.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's for you, Kyler. This was a Bible that they would do pictures, and they would tell biblical stories in pictures, and they would have scrolls coming out of people's mouths to say what they were saying in different
I
parts.
love it.
That is there's some tapestries that told wars, and it told it. You could kind of read it across and see that. So that's kind of the forerunner of what a comic strip was. The first newspaper comic strips actually came around in the late 19th century in North America. It's kind of where they became a thing. And one of the first newspaper strips is actually one called The Yellow Kid,
Okay.
which is a turn-of-the-century theater of the city in which class and racial tensions of the new urban consumerist environment were acted out by a mischievous group of New York City kids from the wrong side of the tracks. Which,
And this was satire, is meant to be humorous.
yeah, it was, little satire of what was going on, a little tongue-in-cheek, talking on social issues. But actually, The Yellow Kid is actually connected to the term yellow journalism, which is sensationalized news stories to sell papers.
Okay.
And this became kind of a thing where these comics commented on that, and also newspapers became a thing where it was like, who had the better comics, who had the most sensational thing going on inside their paper.
Wow.
Now, the Glasgow Looking Glass, as I'm going to call it, was the first mass-produced publication to tell stories using illustrations. And it satirized the political life of Scotland in the 1820s. And then from Scotland, we move over to Switzerland.
yeah.
Yeah. And we get Rudolf Töpfer, who lived in Geneva. He's the father of modern comic strips, and he created The Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck. And that kind of like all built up to what we said in the newspaper wars, as they called them. What's his name? Pulitzer versus Hearst. And they both had...
Pulitzer and Hearst, they think they got us. Do they got us?
No!
I've never seen that either.
Newsies?
Nope.
You've never seen Newsies?
I saw the play. I'm not watching Batman in a musical.
Open the gates and seize the day.
This is Zach. I think
Are you kidding me?
you're anti-newspaper.
I am. Yes.
Why are you anti? Did you ever use silly putty to roll the comics out and like, pull them off?
There's no moving pictures in a
Did you ever
newspaper.
have a pet bird?
Once?
Did it have newspaper?
I don't remember.
That's not the point. So
I would get my dad would cut my hair and I'd like kneel on newspaper.
Santa Fe.
so you got the 1920s, okay? You got these newspaper wars, and that's when comics kind of became the big time, and they were.
And were they big time? Because I think when we read comics, it just seemed like it was like a passing thought.
Right.
Maybe they weren't a reason that people were to subscribe to a paper.
Well, except for the fact that they were, like, people would subscribe to these newspapers for the comics, and newspapers would want to have certain comics, and people would unsubscribe to it from about the 1920s to the 1980s.
Ah.
And then when television and movies and radio became much more forefront, they kind of
Syndication became a thing.
Yes.
Oh, so
now, you and I grew up in the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
And that's...
So we're just saying there's hope for streaming services to do the same thing. That's kind of what it's sounding like, right? Exclusive content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they have all sorts of comics. The strips are not always funny. In fact, there was one guy who preferred, Will Eisner, who wrote The Spirit. He suggested that sequential art would be a better name for comic strips because not all of them are funny.
Like they are not funny on purpose, or they're just not funny.
Yeah, they're
because
dramatic.
they're not funny.
Well, it could be both. Zach, let me explain something to you. During the week, you'd get kind of the black and white mini versions, like maybe 4 panels or a single panel. And then on Sunday, you'd get the full color comics.
Okay.
Where it was like, that was when it was, that was the sweet spot right there.
Yeah. So, for example, every day, so we'd get the Deseret News, and every day I'd find the Today section of the paper, and I'd turn the back page of the Today section, and a full page and a half were taken up by comics. And those were all the 4-panel black and white. And then Sunday, like you said, was the best day.
Well, we say 4-panel too. I want to clarify a bit for those Zacks out there.
Please hope there's
All
no
you
more.
Zacks.
4 squares, usually in a horizontal line, telling a story each one. Like very simple, and
And a very simple joke told.
it became a very formulaic. Everyone did the 4-panel comic.
Yeah.
Some people messed around with it later on, but we'll get to that when we talk about them.
Was this the Circus Family?
The Family Circus. Yes.
The circus family. Don't run
The
away with
Circus
them.
Family. Kent, by the way, since
Yeah.
we're talking about this, do you have any idea what the longest running American comic strips are? Can you name any longest running American comic strips?
I just want to say Prince Valiant because it seems so old.
No, not on the list.
Beetle Bailey?
Not on the list.
I have no idea.
They are in from 10 to 1.
Okay.
This is according to Wikipedia, the source of knowledge and truth.
Yes.
Number 10, Little Orphan Annie.
Oh.
Ran for 86 years.
Did she ever find her eyes?
I don't know. Number
Was she
9.
ever not little?
And I also wonder if you've heard of any of these. You've heard of that
Yeah,
one?
of course.
Okay. Number 9, Bringing Up Father.
No.
Well, it ran for 87 years, Kent. Alley Oop.
I've heard of that one.
Have you?
Yes.
It's been running since 1932. Still going.
Back to Space Jam.
No.
Number 7, Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
Number 6,
Okay.
Blondie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Number 5, Thimble Theater / Popeye.
Oh, so Popeye.
Yeah.
Sure.
Number 4, Barney Google and Snuffy Smith.
Okay.
It's been running since 1919.
Till when?
Now.
What?
Still going. Number 3, Ripley's Believe It or Not.
I'm walking on air.
Number 2, Gasoline Alley.
Yes, I've heard of that one.
You have?
Yeah.
I'd never heard of that. And number 1, the Katzenjammer Kids.
Oh, those darn cats and jammers.
It ran from
And the Silver Spoon.
I don't even know what Katzenjammer Kids is,
Cats in the Jammer and the Silver Spoon.
but that ran from 1897 to 2006. 109 years that comic ran.
Whoa.
Now, it's not always the same author. In fact,
Imagine that.
yeah.
It's the fountain of youth.
When
if you're a comic book,
but I
comic
kinda
strip
like this.
author, yeah.
When comic strips are no longer written by the original author, they're then called zombie strips.
Oh.
Which is kind of a cool.
Well,
No.
No.
well, if you think about it, though, you could write a ton of comic strips and they could just posthumously be
Yes.
published for a long time.
Right.
If you're only doing,
They could.
especially the big deal ones once a week.
And a lot of these authors, they will do primarily around 20, 25 years of daily and a Sunday one because the Sunday is the big deal, right? And then when they kind of want to retire but still be in the limelight, they'll just do a Sunday version.
Yes.
No more dailies.
And some of them, they'll be like, you know what? I'm kind of burned out from doing this. So I'll tell you what, I'll give you a general concept.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a rough sketch. You draw it and ink it and
But
give
it
it to
is
someone else.
It is really cool that the creators of these comics, and we'll get into each, there generally is just one person who writes the jokes, writes every comic and draws them as well.
Yeah. And that's why I find it so impressive is these are, granted they had to work within constraints, but these are authors who had an idea and had creative control of what they wanted to do. By the way, for most of the 20th century, there were at least 200 different comic strips in various newspapers, like at the same time, running at the same time. And my newspaper, I'm guessing there were probably about, 10 to 20.
What? Only 10 to 20?
I'm just trying to go through, like going down the page, and it's probably all would fit on there.
Nope. You probably had about 40.
You think?
Yeah, because they'd always hide the weird ones, the ones you never looked at, and we'll talk about some of those. But yeah, there were probably about 30 to 40.
Yeah. Now, Zach, I'm going to talk your language now.
Yeah.
Paper's gone. People don't subscribe to newspapers anymore.
No.
They still are in circulation.
where
but not as much.
Yeah, where we record, there is only a physical paper on Sundays. They have now digitized all the rest of the week.
Exactly. But digital is the way they're going because these cartoonists, a lot of these ones, Kent, that we're going to talk about today, are still available in web comic form. That you can go to a website and find the daily comic. I did not know that, and I just haven't been reading them all these years. And I feel like I kind of betrayed all those comics that I know and love.
Yeah, but we're also a little bit smarter. They're not as funny. It's
they
like these
though?
comics are like this. They have the same animation, same style, but they're talking about phones and Twitter. And I just don't find that very funny anymore. I think when I was 11 and 12, I'm like, that's hilarious.
But I think if
for
you
four
find
panels.
the right comic is the thing.
Yeah.
Because some comics, it's like parents' hairstyles.
Go on.
When you, well, most adults too, but parents in particular, you reach a certain age where you're just kind of in your hairstyle for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's the hairstyle you're going to choose.
Right.
I have reached that point in my life.
You think you've reached that
This
point?
is basically what I had my senior year of high school, and it's
Yeah.
just kind of gone from there.
I've seen old pictures of you, Joel, and it's like, that's him.
Basically my hairstyle. And I feel like
My hair's changing every day.
some of these comics are like basically in limbo or purgatory,
Okay.
where they're in the same thing forever and telling the same type of jokes. But some comics that were made later, they are now in that other time, and they're able to be sharper and more sarcastic, for example, rather than lighthearted like they were supposed to always be.
Right.
So comics don't usually change in tone, but I'm just saying if they were created later, you might still like them.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the history of comics.
Love it.
Wow.
In a nutshell.
So is this where Comic Sans comes from?
I don't know.
that.
No,
But-
actually, if you look at it, I once used the Comic Sans, famously like horrible font. If you use it in the
It's not
context,
papyrus.
No, if you use it in the context of a speech bubble in a comic, it actually looks really good.
Huh.
Weird,
I
right?
wonder if that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Where
Anyway.
does the sans come from?
It's sans
Sans-
serif. Oh, yes. We'll
Save it for our font show.
I'm gonna have a font show. Yay!
We should tier fonts.
Yes. Tier 1 Helvetica.
All right.
We have
Helvetica's great. I like Ariel as well.
Arial. Yeah.
Yeah.
Save it for our font show.
Tahoma. I'm a big fan.
Bookendika, guys. That's where it's at.
All right. Easy there, Georgia. So we have 12 categories that you guys have put together, and you are going to educate me on what's going on.
Yeah. So ask any questions.
I'm
We're also going to try to explain the stills.
Yes.
Like, for example, I may pull out 4 frames, do the characters, and try to make it funny. So what I'm going to do is drive everyone away from ever reading these. Joel, I don't know if you're going to do the same.
No, I'm going to try, but I'll tell you what, explaining a comic strip is like the best way to suck the funny out of it.
Yes.
Like if you've ever, okay, this is one of my memories, by the way, is even when I became an adult, and I'm an old adult, but we got the Sunday paper for free, I think. They gave us a free subscription for a couple months.
Yeah.
And during that time, I would get down and read the comics to my kids. Okay, reading it out loud is not the same as reading it in your head.
Yeah.
So I'd read it out loud, it would lose some funny, and then my little kids would be like, what does that mean? And I'd have to explain it, and it even got less funny.
Yeah.
But they would laugh then. So
I think you're supposed to love the characters after reading it for so long and read it in their voice, and that's why it's funny. Because many of these jokes, 1 in 5 stick,
yeah.
if that.
I tried, by the way, because I wanted to give some examples of what they were about. I tried to think about what joke or what story particularly stuck out in my head and try to explain that here.
Okay.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So please excuse us.
It's not going to work on this
butchering
show, so
these.
we
Oh,
apologize.
yes. Join us, listener, as we take a completely visual medium to audio form.
That's what movies are.
You can at least listen to a movie. You can't listen to a comic strip.
You listen to someone read them.
Well, here we go. First category is read out of habit.
So this is the one that maybe you started when you were young and maybe you didn't like it as much, but you still
Like your
kept
eyes
reading.
always glanced over it, and you're like, okay, well, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like the last 3 seasons of The Office. You're,
Yeah.
you're stuck.
Yeah.
You're there.
Yeah.
So you just have to.
Fair
Joel,
comparison.
which one did you read out of habit?
I said Dennis the Menace.
Oh, okay.
So Dennis the Menace was one of those
Never
cartoons.
Go ahead.
I shouldn't say never funny because it is very simple humor. It's like, oh, Dennis did something mischievous again, and Mr. Wilson's angry. By the way, created by Hank Ketchum in 1951. Here's the premise, as I put for all these. Dennis the Menace takes place in a middle-class suburban neighborhood in Wichita, Kansas. That's what,
Okay.
I kind of pulled that out there. But Dennis he's a rascal.
Yeah.
And kind of like he's pre-Bart Simpson, I'll call him.
Yeah, good call.
But much more family-friendly. Much more, because even though he's a menace, he was still good.
Yeah, he wouldn't tell anyone to eat his shorts, for
No,
example.
he's a polite kid. For the example I have in this one, I remember a comic where Dennis is talking about how he likes Looney Tunes. I think he mentions Wile E. Coyote or something like that. And Margaret, who's this snobbish girl he hangs out with, says she doesn't watch those types of cartoons because she thinks they're too violent. Dennis then insults her and she beats him up. And then he says, I bet you didn't learn that from My Little Pony or whatever she watched or something like that. See? It works when you explain it. What?
Maybe we should cancel this experiment.
Oh, man. So, fun story, by the way. So, this was created March 12th, 1951. On March 17th, 1951, there was a UK comic that was released called Dennis the Menace.
Ooh.
So, they had the same name. And so, when ours is published in the UK, it's under a different name. When theirs is published here, it's called Dennis and Nasher. So, there you go.
Who's Nasher in
He's
that?
a dog, I think, that hangs around with him. I kind
Okay.
of looked it up, but it's a punk little kid again. So you get Dennis, Henry, Alice, Ruff, Mr. Wilson, Martha Wilson, Joey, Tommy, Gina. I'm trying to think of all the characters here, but it's this group of people that kind of all revolve around Dennis and his antics. Dennis, by the way, named after Hank Ketchum's real-life son, Dennis. So, because he was a little bit of a punk.
It's a very Leave It to Beaver-esque sort of idea, right? It feels very 1950s. I guess maybe for the 80s it fit too, because we all had vivid imaginations and would be rascals like Dennis.
Yeah, because there was a cartoon of Dennis the Menace, live action, live action movies.
The first live action movie was pretty good.
There was a live action TV series from 1959 to 1963.
That's right, on Nick at Night.
Then there was an animated series in the 80s.
Yes.
86 around there. Then there was the movie with Walter Matthau in 93.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess they probably...
With Christopher Lloyd is the homeless guy that scared kids.
What you got there, sport?
Apple. Apple.
I think they rebooted the cartoon around that time as well. So.
And by the way, I found out movies are for the Oscars, music is for the Emmys, Tony's is for theater, and Reuben Award is what comics get. As in Rube Goldberg. It's kind of this...
Oh, really?
I think that's what it came from, is something like that. But
Not the sandwich?
No.
I really like the sandwich.
The sandwich is great.
I've had too many bad Reubens.
Save it for a sandwich.
I always had the hots for Dennis's mom when I was
Alice?
11. Yeah.
Well, she's a very nice woman, Kent. I
She's
understand
very...
why.
Yeah.
I wanted to point this out. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Dennis the Menace, I don't even remember, he was the mascot for A&W restaurants for a while, and also Dairy Queen from 1971 to 2001 until they finally decided kids could no longer relate to Dennis the Menace. I want to point this out too, Kent. Half the comic book rights were purchased by Stan Lee and Marvel Comics.
Really?
So we may see in Phase 5 of Marvel Dennis the Menace.
It's just going to be The Menace. I'm into that.
Yes. Dennis the Menace is one of those cartoons. If you haven't looked it up, it's still around. It's wholesome. It's good. But I definitely read this one all the time, long after I stopped relating to Dennis.
Okay.
All right, Kent, what did you read out of habit?
Beetle Bailey.
I know Beetle Bailey.
Yeah, so everyone kind of knows this one. It's generally the characters there is Beetle Bailey, and he's like the skinny, lazy private, right? Meanwhile, you have Sarge, who's always angry, always hungry. Sarge's dog, who looks exactly like Sarge, Otto, who's always wearing the same general clothes as well. It's just this idea where Beetle is always in trouble for everything. It revolves around the inept characters stationed at Camp Swampy. This went from 1950 to now, even, surprisingly, because it's a very dated concept. This is military life, post-World War II, Korean War.
This is like MASH, but
It's
still
MASH.
going.
Yeah, exactly. It was created by Mort Walker, and he is now assisted by Neil, Brian, and Greg Walker. So I guess his sons. They've kind of carried on this family tradition. Also, Beetle Bailey is actually the brother of Lois Flaxton from High and Lois.
I remember High and Lois.
Yeah, another comic strip. And that is the crossover, our first crossover of the comic strip world.
Ambitious.
Is it? This has over 100 novelized compilations. There was a 1963 TV series made.
50 episodes.
Yeah, 50 episodes. And back in the day, it was seen as controversial because it promoted disrespect to officers, because no one really likes Sarge.
Right.
For example.
Oh, here comes
You ready for the
explanation.
jokes?
I'm ready.
So this takes place. This is a conversation between this is so dumb. Conversation between Beetle and Sarge. So Beetle says, "Hey, where are you going?" Sarge says, "My hometown is having a parade of heroes. They want me to be in it." "What have you ever done that's heroic?" "I put up with you guys." That's the end of the comic.
Because he's hard to get along.
I get it.
Let's keep going with the explanation. Explain the joke. Explain the joke.
Beetle Bailey was censored in 1962 because it showed a belly button in one of its panels. So
Gasp and recoil.
I know. So that's Beetle Bailey.
But did you know that in 1988, there was a musical that was put together based on Beetle Bailey?
What?
Yes. It played at the Candlewood Playhouse in New Fairfield, Connecticut for what I would imagine is a very limited run.
Oh, for sure.
Zach, you didn't pick any. How did you know this?
Wikipedia, the source of all knowledge.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
So it has a Wikipedia page.
Yes, and it talks about the musical in 1988.
Nice.
I'd watch that.
Beetle Bailey. Good choice.
All right, for our next category, we have the one you always hated, yet always read.
So this is different from the last category. Because last category is, you know what? You liked it at one time.
It's fine. You
and
still
then
read
you
it
still
all the time.
You still kind of
Not
liked
painful.
it. This is more like
a hate read.
Yeah. Why am I reading this? I hate it so much.
The Amazing Spider-Man.
Stop. What? Why?
Yeah.
Why?
And this was my first introduction to Spider-Man.
This is why you hate Marvel.
No, I love Spider-Man, but I always read this one, and the reason I hated it is because it's generally only 3 panels on this one, and they try to tell a story in 3 to 4 panels, and it does not work for comic book form. And so these are actually original stories created by Stan Lee, Roy Thomas, and several artists. This one went from 1977 to 2019. And this
So it's done.
Yeah, it's done. These were not stories taken from the comic books. Totally independent because of the medium and scrunching it in. And it was very text heavy. And generally, they had to summarize what happened in the previous episode the day before. And then there was a box for Spider-Man to be like, I think someone's in trouble. And then the next one is the Goblin saying, now I've got Spider-Man right where I want him. And that's where it would end.
Yeah.
And as someone that loves comic book heroes, I was like, that gives me nothing. There's no action. It's more like a soap opera, the way the story is told. It's a lot of drama with Aunt May, Mary Jane, Peter, Flash, all those guys.
I tried, by the way, to follow The Amazing Spider-Man a couple times.
Yeah, you can't.
And I would read it for a couple weeks, and I'd miss a paper or two, and then I'd be like, I don't know what's happening now.
And that's why I hated it. The story arcs went from 8 to 12 weeks, and you had to read every single day. It's like doing homework. But would I read it every day? Yes, I would. Even though I'd be confused because then the Sunday paper was different from the daily paper, and it never made any sense. So I do have a description of one of the
Please go on.
some of the panels. So voiceover says, and by the way, no context necessary. A voiceover says, after Spidey finished his performance. That's the beginning.
Is he on Broadway?
Yeah. And so a group of guys are in one frame and they, shut up, you guys. The man's going to talk. Give him a chance. Yeah, cool it. We want to hear him. And then Spider-Man in the next panel says, speeches aren't my thing, so I'll keep it short. And then a villain in the background says, talk all you want, fool. It'll be the last speech you will ever make. To be continued. That is why I hate the Amazing Spider-Man comic strip. It never gave you any closure.
Yeah. I understand that.
But I always read it.
Yeah. I remember like when Nintendo Power used to do that too, where they do like comic and then you have to get the next issue. And then
but it's so short.
I never knew what happened to Simon Belmont. He was trapped in a different dimension.
Oh no, poor Simon.
I know.
Simon? What a terrible night for a curse.
I don't know if you know this, but this actually went on to spawn multiple film series.
Really?
Yeah. Crazy.
Around the time it ended, 2019.
The Amazing Spider-Man. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. There was 2002 series and 2012 series.
Yep.
I'm so confused.
Now, Kent, that one for you, the one you always hated, I get it, but at the same time, it's Spider-Man. I can't hate it. This is one I hate.
Okay.
Frank and Ernest. Do you remember Frank and Ernest?
With that one?
Created by Bob Thaves back in 1972. The premise is the humor of the comic is almost exclusively based on wordplay and puns. Oh. Not good ones, mind you.
You should love this, Joel. It's your thing.
Well, the problem is I like a good pun. And Frank and Ernest, they're two slovenly looking characters, usually a hat, coat, talking to each other. Sometimes they're animals, sometimes they're vegetables, sometimes they're minerals. You know, it doesn't really matter. But it's always them having some sort of wordplay with each other. For example, just picture this, okay? One guy is standing at the blackboard with some simple math on it, 1 + 1, 2 + 2, you know, that like that. And the other guy is facing away. Frank. How does facing away from first grade arithmetic simplify your life? Ernest. Easy. It's back to basics.
Okay, that's actually the most funny one we've talked about.
No, it's not.
Because it's back is to basic learning.
I was always...
That's why it's funny.
This comic book insulted my intelligence every time I read it. The comic book, I keep saying comic strip. Insulted my intelligence every time I watched it. Almost every single time, they don't use panels. It's just a single frame with two people talking.
Okay.
Or, you know, maybe more than two people. But it's always this kind of just one frame kind of thing going on here. And the guy, Bob Thaves, who wrote it, he, unlike most cartoonists, he did not write all the gags for the strip. In fact, he openly solicited for gags and even put his email address out there or mailing address to be like, send me jokes, and then I'll put them in cartoon form.
Because it doesn't take much of a joke to make a comic strip, so he was probably taking anything.
He was.
Any sort of Laffy Taffy joke that could have gone in there.
And it is. Like, these are Laffy Taffy style jokes where I'm like, why is this still published? Why do people read this?
Okay.
It's still going. And it's terrible puns to this day. I looked them up. I looked at the
Back
ones
to
in the
Basics
webcomics.
was tier 2, though. Let's be honest.
No! That's the level of humor you're going to get, though. The whole thing, Frank and Ernest, it's kind of, that's a pun in itself of Frank being open and honest and Ernest being sincere. That's the joke, I guess.
Yeah.
But Frank and Ernest is one where the puns were always so bad, it annoyed me.
As far as I can tell, that has not been adapted into anything else, another media.
Did you read any of the Frank and Ernest comics?
You
should look at just
I
read
just
one.
did.
And it was good.
Will you recite one for us, Zach?
Yes. So they're walking out of a gym, obviously looking tired. It says, biting off more than I can chew isn't the problem. It's biting off more than I can work off.
Because they just got out of a
I hate it.
gym, and they're trying to work it off.
They're trying to work off the food.
See, Joel, I don't know if you get it yet.
I get it.
It's terrible.
Joel, what is a comic that always went over your head?
Now, over my head may not be the right word here.
Well, we were pre-teen years or even teen years.
yeah, I'd read these as kids and into
Yeah.
adulthood, but I'm going to go with Doonesbury.
So am I.
What?
Yeah, same choice.
We matched?
Yes, we did.
I'm going to
Okay.
go with that one as well.
Because Doonesbury was made for people that followed politics in the 1970s.
Yes.
That is it.
And so made in 1970, started in 1970. Gary Trudeau is the author. Chronicles the adventures and lives of an array of characters of various ages, professions, and backgrounds. From the President of the United States, the title character, Michael Doonesbury, who had progressed from a college student to a youthful senior citizen over the decades. So these are
Never funny.
no.
Never funny.
They try. It's like political humor that's not humor.
The art style is better than most because there's more detail there, but even that is
really
pretty
long
smug.
noses.
Yes. It has a style that stands out.
It
You see a
does.
Doonesbury comic and you actually know, even if you've never read it, oh, Gary Trudeau, I've heard that name, and Doonesbury, okay, that makes sense. And isn't that kind of political? Mm-hmm. I didn't even write down any sketches here because it's a long diatribe. I
Yeah.
basically wrote, just imagine a really dour SNL political intro.
Yeah.
Because that's what every Doonesbury comic
I
is.
feel like this is the precursor to all the political comedy shows that we have nowadays, and with much less attempts at humor.
You mean like The Daily Show,
Yeah.
Colbert Report
Yeah,
type
it's
shows
like that type of
we've
thing,
had?
but not as witty at all.
He really pats himself on the back, the author Gary Trudeau
Oh my
does, because
gosh, yes.
like he called out Nixon back in the day, and he loves himself for it.
And it was the first daily comic strip to win a Pulitzer Prize.
Right,
for
very
editorial
awarded
cartooning.
for sure.
Everyone,
But why was that? I mean, they actually did move that into the political commentary section of the newspaper after a while.
Mm-hmm.
But why was that? That's like a New Yorker type comic.
no, I'd like read it and be like, Dad, what's the Exxon crisis? What's happening right now?
10.
What's going on?
What's in the Suez Canal?
And then obviously, I mean, they do expect the cartoon being more liberal, obviously lampoonning a lot of Republican candidates.
Sure.
And like they had a whole thing with a recent president where it was just like he was this reoccurring, larger than life, overbearing character in every single comic strip. It seemed to be hitting the same note over and over again. By the way, the name Doonesbury comes from the combination of the word Dune, which is prep school slang for someone who is clueless, and the surname of Charles Pillsbury, who was the author's roommate at Yale University. It's basically saying my roommate is clueless. That's every time you read Doonesbury.
Yeah.
That's what it means.
I read it a few times trying to get smarter, but it sure didn't work because I never got it.
I remember there was like an invisible character that would talk, and like this guy was always wearing sunglasses, and every time I read it, expecting to be like, "Oh, it's going to be funny," and then I'm like, "I don't get it." And then I got older, and I was like, "I don't like it."
Right.
So this over my head may not be the right term, but I found this one kind of just pretentious and boring.
Yep. Agreed.
Why haven't they adapted this into a movie?
They adapted it into a Broadway musical.
They did.
They did. Trudeau took a 22-month hiatus, and during the break, he helped create a Broadway musical of the show,
Is it called Toons?
showing the graduation of the main characters. Stop. It opened at the
Actually
Biltmore
worked for Frank
Theater
and Ernest.
and played 104 performances.
Oh wow.
So there you go.
Okay. All right, Kent, what actually made you laugh?
Foxtrot.
I love Foxtrot.
Foxtrot is so good.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I couldn't find a place to put it.
Okay, I wondered if you were going to include it. Foxtrot is one of these, when we talked about this show, this is one of my go-tos because the art style is so simple. You often can't even see faces or just these really small circle eyes of the characters, big hair.
Yep.
This centers around the daily lives of the Fox family, and it's just the father Roger, wife Andrea, and the 3 children. And Jason is probably the most well-known. He's
Yes.
the youngest one. He's the nerd.
Yes.
This one is still going. In fact, I read a few recent webcomics of this, and they kind of play upon
Still funny?
It's more so like Comic-Con sort of stuff. Like he's always in cosplay, and
This is one of the
yeah.
more recent ones too, right? Wasn't this in the 80s?
This started in
90s?
1988
Yeah.
and went 2006 daily, and now it's just Sundays or web comics. I guess everything is now just
This
Sundays.
is one I really did enjoy. It was a welcome edition.
Bill Amend did this one, and this one is often really funny. So I'm going to try to explain why this one is funny.
Do it.
And I'm going to explain it instead of telling the jokes as the characters. So Jason enters the scene and his parents are having breakfast. And he's trying to scare them. It's a Halloween version because the Halloween ones are always really good. And he shows up and he is dressed up as a ghost. And he goes, boo! and they don't even notice him. Next scene, he comes in. He's this murderous doctor. Blood everywhere. Ah! They're not phased. Next one, he's a xenomorph. He's like, ah! They don't even notice. The next one, his sister comes in, and she's in a Halloween costume. She's in her underwear for her Halloween costume, and the parents scream because their daughter is barely wearing anything.
Yeah.
And that's the joke, right? And that's what this plays really well is like, the family dynamic is funny. The sister is always annoyed by her brothers. The older brother doesn't care about anything, super apathetic. And yeah, it's really clever. Even kind of now, I guess I would say, but this really appealed to me because I was nerdy Jason when I was younger.
Yeah.
So
During the late 90s, the character of Jason Fox was licensed to Wolfram Research as a product spokesman for its Mathematica software package.
makes sense. Way to go, Jason. Endorsement deal.
Mathematica.
But yeah, Foxtrot is one that, because most of these are just like, that's funny. And we'll talk about more. But Foxtrot is one that actually made me laugh out loud.
What about you, Joel? What made you laugh?
I think I'm going to steal Kent's thunder later on for this one because we talked about this one.
Okay.
But I'm going to go with The Far Side.
Oh, all right. All right.
So The Far Side, created by Gary Larson in 1979 through January 1st, 1995, basically stopped in 1994. This one, its surrealistic humor is often based on uncomfortable social situations, improbable events, an anthropomorphic view of the world, logical fallacies.
Good job on that word.
Thank you. Impending bizarre disasters, often twisted, references to proverbs, or the search for the meaning of life. I chose a couple. I couldn't choose just one. And I'm going to explain them.
Examples. Okay.
Examples. And you probably see
You're going to ruin The Far Side.
a little bit. So there's one where these two people are on a date at a table, and the woman says, "I judge a man by the shoes he wears, Jerry." And if you look at the comic strip under the table, the guy's shoes have like fruit and horns and rabbits on them. And for some reason, I thought that was hilarious as a kid. And I still find it funny. I looked at the comic going, rabbits. Another example, a kid is desperately like pushing on a door, and there's a sign on the door that says pull. And then the front of the school reads Midville School for the Gifted.
Yeah, it makes sense for Midville, too. Yeah. Yeah.
Local slam. Oh. So, I mean, there's so many things to talk about. There's the reoccurring themes of like desert island, people stranded on a desert island, aliens coming to Earth, cows. There's so many cows in Far Side.
They're in hell often.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, he uses animals a lot because he had a background in biology. Gary Larson did. So this one was one, I like the story of this one because he was working as a cashier at a retail music store and realized how much he hated his job.
Been there.
So then he decided he was going to sit down at this table. He drew 6 comics, sent them to the editor, and they said, we like that. We'll pay you $90. So he quit his job and started doing what he called Nature's Way, which was the original single panel comic strip, which became The Far Side.
Is that a granola bar now? I feel like it is.
It could be. Yeah. But then they weren't paying him enough. So he was like, okay, well, I'm out. So then he went to do the local Humane Society, worked for them for a while. And then when he met a reporter during a story on pony abuse, as it says here, the reporter that was there saw some of his cartoons, said, "Can I take these to my editor?" And they said, yes. So then she showed it to the editor, and they started paying him a little bit more. So he's like, hey, I'm going to quit the Humane Society. But then what he decided to do was to go to San Francisco because he was up in Seattle.
Okay.
He was going to go to San Francisco, give him a portfolio of his work. And he gave it to him. And then when he got back to Seattle, he found out that his comic had been canceled because it got too many complaints.
Oh.
Apparently it was because right next to the crossword puzzle that was for kids. And his humor was a little more...
Edgy?
Edgy's not the word.
Yeah, it's not.
Twisted?
Sure, yeah, twisted.
But in a good way. So then he was glad he found that after, because if he would have gotten his comic canceled before he went to San Francisco, he never would have done it.
Absolute legend.
But then that one, the affiliate in the San Francisco that said, okay, we'll take it. They said, well, we're going to call it The Far Side. He's like, I don't care if you call it Revenge of the Zucchini People. It's fine. I don't care. But then it became one of the biggest comics ever. During his 15-year run, he produced 4,337 comics. And it was in more than 1,900 papers and translated into 17 different languages. And it became a sensation.
Yes.
You'd see it on, I mean, obviously calendars.
Yeah, calendars
t-shirts.
are like the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Right.
T-shirts, greeting cards.
Yes.
All over the
I've
place.
seen. I'm literally only familiar with this from the merchandise.
Yeah.
and the daily calendars.
And they're out there. Although he hated stuff on the internet. He disapproved of his work being out on the internet because he wanted to have control of it. He did finally, after a 25-year hiatus, he did launch his own website for The Far Side, which now does like a daily dose of previously released comics. but he also has done an occasional new one every now and then. So he's once again,
fantastic.
as of 2020, started doing a couple new ones every now and then. But yeah, you mentioned calendars, greeting cards, 23 compilation books, has generated him over $70 million in revenue just for the books alone. It's had an effect on the world as well. There's this comic where a paleontologist is pointing to the spiky end of a stegosaurus and saying, I'm calling this the thagomizer. And now paleontologists, in a casual conversation, like an actual medical term, but they call it the thagomizer because of the Far Side. So it's a long-winded talk about the Far Side, but especially since it's a category about things that make me laugh.
It's very worthy.
But this is such clever comedy. Such clever comedy.
Yeah.
And it's a single panel, meaning he didn't use the 4 panels in Progressive Story.
Yeah.
One shot, one drawing with a caption, and it's comedy gold, Jerry.
Yeah.
Comedy gold.
Produced an animated special in 1994 and a sequel in 1997. Okay, Joel, what is your most overrated? We talked about one that you laugh at. What do you think's overrated?
I wanted to put Doonesbury here
What?
because it is definitely
Because
overrated.
it's been very rewarded.
Yeah, it got like the Pulitzer and all those other prizes, and people have, lofted it up there.
But you can't.
But I can't because I already used it once. So in this one, I'm going to put Kathy.
Well, that's mean.
Overrated. So
But that's
Kathy,
mean.
it is a little mean because I'm not the demographic.
Not at all.
But in fact, I think there's a joke. Oh, what show is that on? Where they have this treasure of like in a vault, and they're like, it's the one Kathy comic that men find funny. And I was like, that's a clever joke. So created by Kathy Guyswite. I can never say her name right. And it was from 1976 to 2010. The comic is about a woman, Kathy, who struggles with the 4 basic guilt groups of life: food, love, family, and work. I didn't really have an example that I could put out there, but my only thing is like when
She always gets frazzled over everything.
in 30 Rock, they
Yeah.
make a mention of Liz Lemon acting like Kathy, and then it shows her and she goes, chocolate, 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 ack. And I'm like, oh, that's Kathy in a
Yeah, that's
nutshell.
Kathy.
And I think there is actually a strip where there's Halloween candy yelling at her, chocolate yelling at her, telling it to come eat her, and she's in the other room, and she's like, no, it's for the kids. And they're like, no, you need to eat me. And that's funny. This appeared in over 1,400 newspapers at its peak, and she said, Kathy, the author, I should say Kathy, the author, not Kathy, the character, she drew funny pictures as an emotional coping mechanism, and her mom kept saying, send it in, you're going to be famous, send it in. And so she said, my entire goal with my submission packet was to get my mother off my back. My goal was not to do a comic strip. It was to make mom quit telling me that I could do a comic strip.
Wow.
But then it became hugely successful. More than 20 books compilations have been created, 3 television specials, one of which won an Emmy Award.
What?
Kathy won an Emmy Award, and she won the Reuben in 1992. I felt like this is a little overrated because it is one of those put on a pedestal as one of the great comics of all time. But every time I read it, I kind of went, yeah, we get it.
It's same-ish.
You're
the
insecure.
joke is same-ish.
She's insecure about her weight when she's trying on anything. She likes chocolate. She hates her job.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I just didn't get as much. Kathy ended in 2010, as I mentioned. This is a spoiler alert for Kathy, by the way.
5,
the final
6, 7, 8.
Thank you. The final strip ran with the revelation that Kathy is pregnant with a girl. So
Because she always wanted to have children.
she did.
just
She
had-
got married, which was kind of cool
Yeah.
to see the progression of a character in that regard.
Right.
But yes, I'm going to put Kathy in the overrated category.
Kent?
I'm going to beat that one. Dilbert.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Dilbert's not good.
Yes, Dilbert is one of those you see in IT room,
Yeah.
IT offices.
Merchandising is all over the place.
Yeah,
This
it's like
one,
the little plushie.
created by Scott Adams, 1989 to present day. This is a satire of the workplace, technology, and company issues. Granted, these are jokes we all currently get
Yeah.
now that we're this age.
This is the precursor to Office Space. The precursor to The Office.
It's true. But I feel like The Office Space, I don't know, it gets me somehow. This one is just jokes that I'd rather not ever think about outside of work.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm going to agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it is overrated.
Because it's launched TV specials. I think it had a TV series
there was a
as well.
TV series, yeah.
It has its own line of mints. Dilbert mints.
Mints?
No, get this.
Like
These are what
breath
they're
mints?
called. Accomplish mints, appease mints, appoint mints, perform mints, harass mints, manage mints, pay mints. It keeps going, Joel.
That's
These
a
are
lot.
different flavors. Or-
Apparently.
don't like that.
And there's Dilbert. Everyone knows the look of Dilbert. I think even by saying that, it does create a visual, and
It's
that's
got
why I
the
say
tie
it's
that's curled up, right?
Right.
Yep.
Oh, that irritates.
Pointy head.
there's the pointy-haired boss. No name, by the way, just pointy-haired boss. PHB. Dogbert. It's a dog that always wants to take over the world. I guess that's a thing. Yeah. Anyways, the sketch that I found to read to you guys is kind of funny, but it's just office humor that I think we're all bored of now that Zoom calls have kind of taken over many people's lives.
Yeah.
And so a consultant is there and she says, "What's your take on this, Dilbert?" And he says, "What? Sorry, I was using this time to think about something useful." And then the consultant says, "Maybe your boss can fill you in." And the boss says, "I was brain golfing."
Brain golfing?
And it's funny because,
Because business people golf.
yeah, it's the workplace and none of us are
Checking
paying
out.
attention, and that's fine. I just don't ever want to think about this outside of work. We get the jokes, but Dilbert is overrated. Very, very well known.
Yeah. I'm going to agree with you. I think it's a good point.
All right, next up we have You Never Understood Why It's Still Being Printed. What do you think, Kent?
This one started in 1937. It's Prince Valiant.
That's what I think.
Okay, I had a feeling.
Yeah.
So Prince Valiant appeared only in the Sunday paper back when I was reading. So this one was in full color. It was almost sometimes just one panel or two. And there was Prince Valiant. You saw the bold title there. You saw him in his dark hair, Dutch boy haircut.
They call it the Prince Valiant cut. And it's like that short bangs with like the curl and the whoopty at the bottom.
Wait, do that again.
Whooped.
There we go. And he was
What do they call that in the barber world?
I have no idea.
the Valiant.
The page
I
boy?
really hope so.
Sure. A mistake.
Yeah, and this one always showed up top left of the paper, and I'm like, that's valuable real estate. Why are you wasting it on my grandpa's comic strip? This is not okay. So Valiant is a Nordic prince from Thule. He arrives in Camelot and becomes a knight of the Round Table. He fights through the late Roman Empire to the Middle Ages. Basically, he's kind of like a non-canonical, fantastical hero that fights in wars over the course of a millennium.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and like at the beginning, it was much more fantastical. It got much more grounded in quote unquote reality as the comic progressed. They did a lot less magic, a lot less crazy stuff.
Yeah, Zach, I want you to look this up as we're talking about it.
By the way,
I am.
Kent,
I'm very confused.
I feel bad. I feel bad they're not using the full name.
Oh, go ahead.
The full name is Prince Valiant in the Days of King Arthur.
Sorry. So this was made into a movie in 1954 starring Robert Wagner and Janet Leigh.
And a movie in 1997 starring Ron Perlman and Stephen Moyer and Katherine Heigl.
Oh, I'm sure it was great. So he's basically known for the haircut. And sometimes there's just a panel with words and some like swords and shields action happening. And that's about it.
Still happening.
Yes.
It's still happening. This is one story they're telling. It's like over 4,000 strips. And even today, 300 American newspapers carry Prince Valiant.
I don't understand.
Do you know what I remember, though?
Like,
Is how cool
bribed
they
them?
looked.
Yeah, no, the art style is very, very cool.
It's like a very realistic kind of look to it.
Yeah.
Like it looked like those Bible stories that you get.
And I think that's kind of the same. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's blackmail. I think that's the only reason it's still being printed.
Did you hear about like what happened to the author, though?
No.
Sad stuff.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So he stopped illustrating and signing it in 1975. He had arthritis. He was kind of getting older. And then he'd work with the artists and tell them what to do. But then he had some prolonged anesthesia during a hospital stay or an operation. And it took part of his memory, and he no longer remembered doing Prince Valiant.
Oh, no.
It's a sad ending to the
Was he
story.
relieved? Sorry.
Come on. Terrible. He was obviously faking it because he didn't know where the story was going to go. No,
George R. R. Martin?
Lost Riders?
Kind of. Not Lost Riders. But it is a sad ending because the story is still going. I don't know how.
Right.
But I feel bad that the author...
I would love to know if someone out there has collected every Prince Valiant comic.
I want to know
them
if
together.
anyone has been following the story.
True. Yeah, truly.
And if so, did you start from the beginning? Did you hop in the middle? How do you hop in the middle of that?
This might be like, you know how everyone's like, oh, have you read Dune? It's the greatest story ever.
Yeah.
Have you read Doonesbury?
I think maybe Prince Valiant could be the greatest story ever told. HBO, make this boring movie,
Fun
please.
fact, I was going to say here, the Duke of Windsor...
Oh, yes.
what called Prince Valiant the, quote, greatest contribution to English literature in the past 100 years. Which is funny because the author is actually a Canadian-American.
He's
But I
like
guess Canada has
3.5 stars.
They're a province. How about, Joel, what's the most cliche or formulaic?
It's got to be the Family Circus.
It's the Family Circus.
We matched again?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so the central characters of the Family Circus are a family whose surname is rarely mentioned, but, you know, it's based on the author, Bill Keane.
It's Circus.
Well, so it was originally called
Andy
Andy
Serkis
Serkis.
family.
It was
Yeah.
originally called the Family Circle or the Family Go Round, but because there was a magazine called Family Circle, they objected and it became the Family Circus. But it was based on the fact that it was usually a single panel with a circle around it and some cliched thing.
This is basically slice of life moments of kids say the darndest things.
This is Facebook before Facebook.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of my kid and a funny thing they said.
Yeah.
I have an example, Kent.
Yeah, I have one too.
Billy, the 7-year-old boy, is standing in front of his dresser with in his underwear, holding up a pair of shorts and saying, "Can I wear my short sleeve pants?"
Why did that get me so
That's
much?
it. That's the joke. The whole comic.
Sure, I'm calling them short sleeve pants from now on.
As you should.
Oh, wow. So the one I have is the annoying sister. Like, nobody liked the older sister, right? She said, "Mommy, Jeffy stopped washing his hands after singing only one happy birthday." That's
Nobody
it.
likes a narc, sis.
When we talk about formula, this series followed the formula, which I think maybe worked enough. But for
Yeah.
example, it like when it didn't want to tell a joke, it was like Billy, the oldest brother, would just go around the neighborhood to go borrow some sugar, for example. And it would show through dotted lines the path
line.
through the neighborhood, jumping over dogs, riding a bike, that sort of thing. And that was the joke. Also, they created a gremlin in the
Multiple
story,
gremlins.
but the main one is called Not Me.
Yes,
And so
because
they'd be like, who broke this jar? Not me.
And then you have this little invisible character with "Not Me" written on them running past.
So this family had a gremlin around the house.
They also had other additional gremlins.
Why, are you mad right now, Zach? Are you
Zach,
okay?
Zach, here are the other gremlins. Think of a kid answering. So, like, how did this happen? Oh, wait, there's a gremlin named I don't know. There's a gremlin named Nobody. There's a gremlin named Oh Yeah, and a gremlin named Just Because.
That's like discount Abbott and Costello.
Yeah. Although the short sleeve pants, that's funny.
No,
It's kind of funny.
that's what I'm saying. That's a Facebook post.
It
My
is,
kid called
yeah.
it this. It's funny, but he went through the time of actually hand drawing this whole thing. By the way, there are 89 compilations of Family Circus cartoons. 89.
Wow.
That is a lot. The original author did pass away in 2011, and now his son is the one who's doing it. So, family tradition carrying on. Family Circus was one where I really...
It's so sweet.
It's hard to hate it, but at the same time, I would get so annoyed with it where I'm like, that's not funny.
Not at all.
That's not funny.
And by the way, if you want to read these, I think the best way to do it is actually buy one of the compilations.
They have those.
Because they're the best bathroom readers ever.
But they do have, I went to, I think it was Go Comics. I can't remember what it was, one of the sites. And they had a randomizer where you just hit, like they had the comic strip and you hit random and it would pull them from like, the 80s or the 2000s.
Oh,
and
cool.
Jump around like that. And that was a fun way
But I
to do
think
it too.
reading them on paper is kind of the
Yeah.
art there.
Yeah.
Because if you look at something on the internet, you forget it 2 seconds later.
True.
In October 2010, the film rights were purchased by 20th Century Fox and Walton Media. So that means they're probably owned by Disney now.
A live action. They're going to do a live action Family Circus movie.
No. A circus family I would watch,
but
not the family circus. The Gremlins story? Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, what about it never made you laugh, but always made you smile, Kent?
Pickles.
I like Pickles.
Pickles is adorable,
It is an adorable comic.
but it's never funny.
I think some of them are funny.
So the story about Pickles is it was written by Brian Crane, starting in 1990, going to present day. It is about his in-laws. And these are two retired folks.
Yep.
Right? And in the story, it's Earl and Opal.
So while Family Circus is more kind of, young family
Yeah.
humor, this is old person humor.
This is old people dealing with a 6-year-old grandchild. And he's not a bad kid. He just is very inquisitive. And so he'll ask questions, and his grandpa often kind of gives a really lazy answer. Yes, Zach.
Just read a comic. It's really-
Okay, no, please read it to
really
us.
dumb.
We need
Okay.
good examples.
So a kid opens up a drawer and goes, ah. And then what's the grandma?
The grandma's Opal.
Opal goes, what's wrong, Nelson? And Nelson says, there's a hairy animal in that drawer. A hairy animal? Are you sure? Yeah, I think it's a big, ugly rat. She looks in the drawer and says, you're close. It's Grandpa's old toupee. That's so dumb.
when was that written? Most comics will have a date
Yeah.
written on them. Does it have a date written in there?
December 16th, 2018.
That's way too recent for that type of humor.
And the one I have is Opal says, she's sitting on the couch with the dog, and she says, I will not eat that last piece of pie. Next frame. I will definitely not eat that last piece of pie. I will probably not eat that last piece of pie. I will not. Oh, what the heck? Next frame, Earl walks by with an empty plate. Man, that was a good piece of pie. Next scene, Opal to her dog. I will probably not clobber that man.
Because it's going to follow the same.
Yeah.
So there is amusement here. And I don't know why when I was that age, it wasn't like, I was like, this reminds me of my grandparents of spending time summers alone with them. It seemed like Nelson was always hanging out with the grandparents.
Yeah.
The parents were always like going on a cruise or something. Like,
Good for them.
I guess you can take care of my kid.
I like Pickles, and I think Pickles may have been the most clipped.
Zach's got another one. Zach, you got another one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Zach, you're saving the show right here. Please do.
No, I'm just saying that this is probably Pickles was probably the most clipped and put on our fridge.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Probably. Yeah, either Pickles or Zits.
I apologize for this one, Joel.
Don't put those together, please.
What Opal and who was the
Earl.
Earl. Okay. Opal says, "Where are you going?" Earl says, "Bathroom." Opal says, "Goodbye." "What do you mean goodbye? I'm just going to the can with the Sunday paper, crossword puzzle, and a pencil. So farewell until we meet again." And then she says, on her own, "He'll be back. There's no toilet paper."
It's so dumb.
Explaining comics is the best.
Yeah, it's so good.
All right. So mine that never made me laugh, but always made me smile, was actually BC.
Oh, okay.
You guys remember BC?
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
this.
Created by Johnny Hart in 1958. Set in prehistoric times, it features a group of cavemen and anthropomorphic animals from various geologic eras. This is my example, and it's a ridiculous one. BC, the main character, he's a caveman with orange hair. He goes outside one fall day to enjoy a cup of coffee. He sits down next to a tree that only has one leaf left. The leaf falls, and it drifts back and forth across the sky, and he follows it with his eyes, and then it lands right in his coffee mug. And it just shows him yelling, "Really?" That's the joke.
Okay.
But in the comics,
So
the way
it's
they
like
did it,
observational humor,
yeah, it's just like out of all the places
paying
to
very
land,
close attention, and then that's funny, I guess.
this was among the longest running strips still written and drawn by its original creator until he passed away. And I'm going to bring the room down again.
Oh, here we go.
Sorry. He actually passed away from a stroke while at the drawing table.
Oh.
He was literally drawing a comic and then passed away, his wife said. So he died doing what he loved, which is a good thing. But I
Yeah.
was kind of like, wow, that's kind of down. By the way, Johnny Hart also worked on The Wizard of Id, another one that...
I always got those confused.
Yeah, because it's very similar.
Yeah, same art style, for sure.
Yeah. This was one of those things where they originally tried to keep it firmly in prehistoric times, but as it went on, they start making references to current events and inventions and celebrities.
Yeah.
There was also after the author had a kind of a religious experience, revival in his life. He ended up incorporating a lot more religious elements into his...
Really? Into the caveman comic?
Into the caveman comic. Like, there's actually a very touching one I saw on Easter a while back that I was like, that's actually really good. I'm not going to get it because it's not funny.
Yeah.
But it made me smile. Like, there's this whole running gag where, like, the BC will, like, write on a stone tablet and send it out into the ocean. And then a couple panels later, it will come back with some sarcastic response. It's basically like the Flintstones, but in a comic book form.
Yeah.
And I just, every time I'd read it, and I kind of like, well, I kind of enjoy this.
I'll just keep reading it.
And so it made me smile. And I don't know if I ever laughed out loud at any of them, but I always look forward to reading BC, oddly enough.
You know, it was turned into 2 different video games for the ColecoVision.
It's big time.
Yeah.
All right. How about the most clever writing, Joel?
I got to give it to Calvin and Hobbes. So Calvin and Hobbes.
You're using Calvin and Hobbes right here?
I am, because the thing I loved about Calvin and Hobbes, written by authors Bill Watterson, 1985 to 1995. And it's basically the humorous antics of the title character Calvin, a precocious, mischievous, and adventurous 6-year-old boy, and Hobbes, his sardonic stuffed tiger, which becomes anthropomorphic. I'm just going to throw that in all of my things now. So Calvin and Hobbes, the reason I think it's so clever is because Bill Watterson managed to put slapstick humor or satire. Sometimes it was touching.
Imagination. Like it's just running throughout.
Sometimes they were having this deep philosophical discussion while riding down a hill in a wagon, and I was totally engaged with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was touching. I remember there's a whole kind of a story arc when he finds a raccoon that's injured and ends up passing away, and he starts contemplating, like, what is life? Like, why do people have to die? And things like that. And it was very deep for a comic.
Yeah.
But it fits. And then the next week, these creating snowmen, a house of horrors.
killer
one,
snowmen.
One snowman's making snow cones out of the other one and things
Yeah.
like that. I always wanted to make snowmen like Calvin. This is what many consider to be the last great newspaper comic. All the characters were just fun. Like Susie, I loved when Susie would come around and just put Calvin in his place because he was an idiot, but he was a fun idiot. You enjoyed being around him. Honestly, it's kind of like Dennis the Menace, but better in the sense of the character and those surrounding him.
Yeah, he didn't need to cause trouble. He was just trying to use his imagination.
Exactly. And his imagination is what brought Hobbes alive. And because other people saw him as just a stuffed tiger. But he had reoccurring characters like in his imagination, like Spaceman Spiff.
Yes.
And Stupendous Man. He had a transmogrifier, which was a cardboard box that you could walk into and turn into whatever you wanted. Anyway, there's a lot that I could say about this. It was featured in over 2,400 newspapers worldwide. 45 million copies of the Calvin and Hobbes books have been sold worldwide. And I just feel like this is such a clever comic. And the more I read it, the more compilations I read, the more I enjoy it. Now,
Great choice.
Bill Watterson, he is one that he's one of those reserved comics.
Yeah.
He took a couple hiatuses because he fought with his syndicate because he did not want to license his characters for anything. And they're like, this is a huge marketing opportunity. You can make tons of money. He's like, I don't want it. And then you got a bunch of knockoffs, which is why you saw the Calvin peeing on everything, window decals.
Never understood that.
Unauthorized. He did not like those at all.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
And he didn't want to go to any of the ceremonies for awards that he got. Jim Henson, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg all approached him and saying, hey, we'd like to do an animated adaptation. Nope. Zero interest in
Crazy,
that.
right?
And
I
so
cannot believe there's not a movie.
Because the possibility there, I think
Yeah.
maybe when he passes, I think maybe his family tries to make this a movie.
Yeah,
maybe try to cash in. but
CGI animated movie for sure.
yeah. And I do
DreamWorks.
I do, by the way, have an example. I don't know if this is clever, but it's one that I remembered immediately.
Okay.
So there's a monster under Calvin's bed. Okay. And he can't go to the bathroom, but he has to go. And the monster starts making water noises like glub, 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 to make him have to go to the bathroom even worse. And Hobbes is like, well, just go to the bathroom. He's like, I can't. And he's like, I don't know what to do. And then the next panel, in the final panel, the mom and dad are outside of the house just below his window. And the dad says, the plants on the side of the house sure don't do very well.
that's good.
It is good.
Yeah.
And the last comic, the final strip ran on Sunday, December 31st, 1995. And it basically ended with Calvin saying to Hobbes, let's go exploring. Like one final adventure off into the
So good.
sunset.
What a great ending.
It is.
Yeah.
I wish there were more, but I understand he was burned out and he said what he needed to say and he was done with it.
Yeah.
But I wish there was just at least one more game of Calvin Ball we could see.
Oh.
In 2013, there was a documentary released called Dear Mr. Watterson.
Really?
About it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll check it
Anyway,
out.
went on for a long time, but Calvin and Hobbes. If you have not read Calvin and Hobbes, please do so. My kids love it when I check those out from the library.
So many good compilations out there. Go pick them up.
Most clever writing, Kent?
The Far Side. It's been brought up.
Yes.
And so Joel's talked about it a lot. I just want to kind of ruin
I've been
a couple.
talking a lot in general. I'm sorry.
I want to ruin some Far Side comics. So, for example, Noah is talking to the animals as they're about to enter the ark, and he says, now listen up, we're going to do this alphabetically. And you have the zebras saying, beep. Also, one of the ones that always, I think I hated as a kid, but like I've always remembered it. It's donning his new canine decoder. Professor Schwartzman becomes the first human being to hear what barking dogs are actually saying. And there's dogs all around this neighborhood, and they're just saying, hey, 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 hey. And I don't know why it's so funny to me.
Oh my gosh, it just reminded me of something.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Far Side comics is this dog sticking his head out of the car and he's wagging his tail really fast and he's like, yeah, my owner's going to take me on a ride and we're going to the vet so I can get tutored. And we've used that like when we talk about our dogs going to get that operation. We always said, oh yeah, Quigley's going to get tutored.
Oh. Haven't you always thought of the person didn't wash their hands alarm outside the bathroom?
Yes, it's ringing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the guy's like, oh.
Yes.
Oh, or like people in hell are saying, oh man, the coffee's cold. They thought of everything, but there's still coffee.
Yeah.
The Far Side to me is cleverness all the way through. And it's not just like, hey, that made me laugh for a second. It's like that sticks with me even to this day.
I think I have a compilation book at home right now, and I'll flip through it occasionally and laugh all over again.
Of course.
Okay, how about the one you don't know why you liked, but you did?
Baby Blues.
Baby Blues.
Yeah.
That's an interesting pick.
And Baby Blues is one, it's so simple. Like many of these, it just focuses on a small family of 5 because that's so many comics. Very basic drawings, like a lot of just line drawings. But they eventually have 3 kids. As I was reading it, they aged the kids very, very slow. I think when I started, they just had Zoe, the daughter, and she started growing. And then there were, I think,
She has
2
an
other
extraordinary
sons.
playlist.
Sure. That's what I hear. So anyways, it's just a story about raising kids, but it's not as cheesy as Family Circus. I don't know what it is, but it more focuses on how kind of like frazzled parents get with kids. Like, for example, one of the sketches, it's just 2 panels, and it says school day up in the corner, 6:30 a.m. And the mom, Wanda, is saying, get up, you need to eat breakfast. Zoe, the oldest daughter, who's 7 now, saying, no, you can't make me. And the husband, Daryl, says, Wanda, did you pack my lunch? As he's yelling it from off screen. The next panel is, so that was school day, 6:30 a.m. This is summer day, 6:30 a.m. Wanda's in bed. And Zoe is saying, get up, you need to make us breakfast. And Gerald says, Wanda, did you pack my lunch? Remember, she's still in bed. She says, no, you can't make me. So it's just the dichotomy, the relatable.
It's relatable.
Dichotomy of what it's like to be a parent with just kids that need every ounce of your energy. And I read this when I was 11 and 12, and I was like, yeah, I don't have kids. I don't know what that's like, but that's probably what it's like.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a while.
This was developed into a cartoon.
Yes.
That ran in 2000 from July 28th to August 24th.
Oh.
8 episodes were shown before being canceled.
Yeah.
The remaining 5 were eventually released on Adult Swim 2 years later. And then a second season consisting of 13 episodes was produced but never released.
Oh, so they got the blues.
Yeah.
Oh, Baby Blues.
Tossed salad and scrambled eggs. But the comic ran from 1990 and is still going today.
And what about you, Joel? You don't know why you liked it, but you did.
We've already talked about it. It's Beetle Bailey.
There we go.
Really?
I've never served in the military. My
Sure.
dad was out of the military before I was ever born. And yet I just had this enjoyable experience reading Beetle Bailey. I looked for it, even though the jokes were the same almost every time.
Yeah.
I have an example, Kent.
Always good.
So Beetle Bailey and Private Plato are watching ants walk in the grass. Beetle says, why do you suppose these ants are all in that long line? Plato replies, who knows? They're just dumb insects. And then the next panel, Plato says, well, time for lunch. And Beetle and him line up in a long line of soldiers.
Oh, okay.
It's the dichotomy.
Yeah.
Kent.
Yeah. It's clever.
One thing I was going to say, you didn't bring it up, and I wanted to save it for this, is that Beetle Bailey was actually not in the Army to begin. He was actually a college student at Rockview University. And then during the strip's first year, he quit school and enlisted in the U.S. Army, and then he was stuck there ever since. Which means maybe he's in purgatory.
Yeah, I think he might be.
My word.
I don't know. But yeah, we've already talked about a lot about this already, so I won't go into it. But there's a lot of running gags. There was a thing where they actually had the people write in 2002 and name the tech expert who became Chip Gizmo. That was a kind of a write-in thing, but people still cared about this comic in 2002. So, but Beetle Bailey, I think, is one that I don't know why I enjoyed it, but I always look forward to reading Beetle Bailey.
Yeah.
Now we get into our final 2 categories, and these are big ones. So I theoretically may have heard of these. So we have the best characters, Joel.
Best characters.
Yeah.
Zach, have you heard of Charlie Brown?
Indeed, I have.
Snoopy?
Indeed.
Lucy?
Yes.
Linus?
Yeah.
Peppermint Patty?
Peanuts.
Marcy? Sally Brown, Schroeder, Pigpen, Franklin, Woodstock, the little red-haired girl. These are the only comic book characters I can think of that are in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. These are the only ones
Every
that
year.
I mean, you see Snoopy on so many. I had a Snoopy ice a snow cone maker. That was a thing that people did. He's been on mugs. They've been on mugs and cups, and they've had animated specials. And I feel like
One was good.
yes, it was.
Yeah.
But I feel like. By the way, this is created by Charles Schultz, ran from 1950 to February 2000. And also, I really like that this one. Charles Schultz said that he did not want his strip to be continued by another cartoonist. And even as he got older, he didn't want someone to ink it or letter it because he said it's like a golfer hiring a man to make his putts.
Interesting.
And so then when he drew this strip by himself for 50 years, and then after he passed away, his family honored his wishes and says, okay, no new author. It's done.
Did you ever find this to be humorous in any way or just kind of repeated formats that were familiar?
Some I liked. I don't know why, but every time Lucy pulled the football away, that was funny to me.
Okay.
I don't know why. And, it's not one that I was like laughing uproariously at, but it definitely was that amused me.
This one to me was way before my age. I never cared for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I still enjoyed it. By the way, he produced 17,897 strips.
Wow.
That is a lot of writing and drawing. It was originally called Little Folks, or at least the characters were in one called Little Folks, which was in the St. Paul Pioneer Press, a very small thing. But then when it got bigger, the people that wanted to syndicate it said we need a better title. And the
Peanuts is not the better title.
Howdy Doody was on,
Yeah.
and they had a peanut gallery where all the kids sat. So the
Is that where that phrase
decided-
comes from?
Yeah.
peanut gallery came from Howdy Doody.
What?
But then Peanuts, they said, let's just call it Peanuts. And this is what he said. I couldn't think of a better title, and someone at United Features came up with the miserable title Peanuts, which I hate and have always hated. It has no dignity and it's not descriptive. What could I do? Here I was, an unknown kid from St. Paul. I couldn't think of anything else. I said, why don't we call it Charlie Brown? And the president
Yeah.
said, well, we can't copyright a name like that. I didn't ask him about Nancy or Steve Canyon, which were other ones. He said I was in no position to argue.
Or
so
Snoopy.
He never really liked to
I always hated
refer
the
to it as
title.
Peanuts.
Yeah.
And so we always call it, I read a comic strip with Charlie Brown in it.
I don't know that it's. I think it's more known as Charlie Brown because
Yeah.
of the animated
Or
series.
when
and
you're a
stuff
kid,
like that.
you always see Snoopy as like the protagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least I did.
I thought Snoopy was hilarious.
Yeah.
By the way, his comics and together with his merchandise earned Schultz more than $1 billion.
Wow.
And just to give you an idea of the influence of these characters, Snoopy has been the personal safety mascot for NASA astronauts since 1968. They give a Silver Snoopy Award to employees or contractors' employees who promote flight safety.
Wow.
Also, that black and white cap that astronauts wear, at least wore back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Well, not even before the 80s, but that's called a Snoopy cap.
Oh.
Knott's Berry Farm obviously has some Peanuts characters from it as well.
Because they were a little bit cheaper than other characters?
Probably
Maybe.
so.
Okay.
And then he did, I was going to say, the last original Peanuts comic strip was published on January 3rd, 2000. And all it is Charlie Brown's on the phone saying, no, I think he's out typing. And it shows Snoopy typing. And this is what it says. Dear friends, I have been fortunate to draw Charlie Brown and his friends for almost 50 years. It has been the fulfillment of my childhood ambition. Unfortunately, I am no longer able to maintain the schedule demanded by a daily comic strip. My family does not wish Peanuts to be continued by anyone else, therefore I am announcing my retirement. I have been grateful over the years for the loyalty of our editors and the wonderful support and love expressed to me by fans of the comic strip. Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Linus, Lucy, how can I ever forget them? And that's it. He said goodbye.
Real heavy to put the
And then
final
he
frame.
passed away a month later.
Wow.
So it was a very kind of
Good
I don't know,
grief.
good grief.
Ah.
Yes. I think the characters on this are timeless in the sense that we're still decades after his passing and decades after the last original one.
Yeah.
Still know these characters by name. Zach knows them, Ken.
I do.
Yeah.
Zach knows
Can I
them.
talk about why?
Why?
In 1967, there was a musical adapted for this. And then it was revived in the late 90s.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown?
You're a good man, Charlie Brown. And actually, what I really like about You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown is the show itself is vignettes a la a comic strip.
Yes.
So it's just short pieces of a story, like it's playing these comic strips over and over again. It's kind of fun. So
Yeah. Oh, and also after he passed away in May of that year, more than 100 comic strips paid homage to him and Peanuts by incorporating his characters into their strips.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
That was a great tribute.
Yeah.
No,
They're like, you don't want anyone else to draw your characters? We will.
yeah.
It was an homage.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
past out. Intellectual
All right,
property
Ken.
is ours now.
Beat Snoopy.
Oh, I can't. There's no way I can beat those characters because no one knows the names of these characters. For me, it's a personal favorite character list.
Okay, that's fine.
And so these characters are from Sherman's Lagoon.
It's fine to be wrong, Kent.
it's
I remember
right for
Sherman's
me.
Lagoon, but I cannot remember.
So in this is centers on the misadventures of a lazy, overweight great white shark named Sherman, along with his controlling, hot-tempered wife Megan, and the friends and foes who share their tropical home. So there's Sherman, Megan, and Megan is Sherman, but she has pearls. You're right. There's Fillmore, who's the lonely bachelor sea turtle, which I knew I'd eventually become.
Oh,
He makes the annual trip to find a permanent mate, and he always strikes out.
Oh.
There's also Hawthorne, who wears a beer can instead of a shell. Generally, he's rude, stingy, and also a criminal. And so I felt like each of these characters, and this is like a tier 2 comic, but I always read this one.
I remember
because
it.
they each had their own voice. And that's what I feel like a lot of comics didn't get right, is they all spoke with the author's voice. In this one, they felt different. I loved the way the sharks, and I'm not going to read any sketches of it, but basically, or Megan and Sherman would talk about like, hey, I feel like Italian tonight. And then they'd go and there would be some stereotypical Italian swimming in the water right there. Or they're like, oh, there's poodles, and poodles were delicacies for them. Or they'd see a group of swimmers. They'd be like, it's time for a buffet. And they would just casually talk about eating people, and they're great white sharks which I love. And
you don't love Great Shot.
I love and I fear them at the same time, like women. I am Phil Moore, but I just really enjoyed this one. I believe there was probably a TV special at some point. It feels ripe for the opportunity.
Zach would know.
What?
Is there a TV special of
Was there a
Sherman's
TV
Lagoon?
I
special?
didn't see anything. No.
Too bad. But
No.
I really love just like conversations. Then usually they were just sitting down by rocks, and those were their conversations. Maybe
Which
2 or 3
sharks need to
panels.
keep swimming in order to breathe. I just
Yeah,
wanna
it
point
doesn't.
that out.
Come on.
A lot of the comics, they're like weirdly seated.
Yeah, it's like an awkward looking great white shark. But I love these characters. Nobody knows who they are, but personally, some of my favorites.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so that brings us to our final category. This is the Hall of Fame. I have a feeling I know Ken's, but I don't know Joel's.
We're each retiring a jersey here.
Yes.
This
Up
is
in the
someone who we
rafters of the
think
Bacon Cave.
belongs there. Exactly.
Yes.
So mine's been said, and Zach, you know this one. It's Calvin and Hobbes.
Which I think, as soon as you said you're putting it here, I'm like, oh, I know where Kent's putting that one.
Yeah, this one to me is not the most hilarious one. It just captured what, and I'm going to be very specific here, but what the American youth is like. Mm-hmm. You know, whether you're a young boy, young girl, it's just what growing up in America with some pop culture knowledge. Because he'd sit there and Calvin had a great knowledge of sci-fi films, for example. Mm-hmm. And he'd often picture his parents as aliens or villains. And he would just kind of look out his window sometimes and see this great, and the art was amazing in this comic. And he'd picture this like alienscape outside his room.
He was one of the few artists who the newspaper allowed him to mess with the space and like, do different things because he was so good at it.
Yeah. And I can't get enough of this one. I give this a Hall of Fame because he knew when to quit. And it's maybe quitting too soon. I remember I was 14 when this thing ended, and it felt like a death. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, well, that's not going to be in the paper anymore.
Yeah.
Can we get reruns? Like it won't matter to me. Mm-hmm. But there is something special about this. I agree. I think this is maybe not the last great one, but this is one of the absolute great ones.
And a lot of cartoonists said the same thing. They're like, wow, what he's doing, that's amazing.
Yes.
Like he was also respected and hated by a lot of other cartoonists.
Oh, really?
Well, they just thought that he got way too much leeway to do what he wanted.
Yeah.
And some other cartoonists.
Especially in the Sunday paper, his panels were huge. It took up a lot of space. Mm-hmm. And that probably cost the paper a lot of money. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. But he deserved it.
Yeah.
And Hobbes as a character is perfect.
I love Hobbes. I think every boy wants to have a Hobbes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But not Hobbes and Shaw.
No.
Calvin and Hobbes
I
and
was
Shaw.
trying to avoid this joke.
Yeah, sorry, I went there.
Yeah.
All right, Joel, I'm really curious.
What is your Hall of Fame?
You've gone with Snoop or Charlie Brown and the gang.
Yep.
You've mentioned Far Side. You've mentioned Calvin and Hobbes.
Yes.
What else is there?
Someone who hates Mondays.
You would.
So Garfield by Jim Davis started in 1978. It chronicles the life of the title character, Garfield the cat, John Arbuckle, his human owner, and Odie the dog. So Garfield is one of those that everyone knows, whether you saw Garfield and Friends, whether you watched the Garfield Halloween special, whether you've seen him also in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Or in the movies.
He hates Mondays and he loves lasagna. Very simplistic view of it. I have an example here. It's one of my favorite ones. It's not going to translate well, but holy cow, this made me laugh so hard as a kid. So John is on the phone. He like just starting a phone conversation. He says, "Hello, Debbie, my sweet." And then Garfield runs by and sneaks the steak off his plate right in front of him. So John like moves the phone away and yells, "You fat greedy pig! I'd have shave you bald and put you out in the cold." Oh, and then the phone clicks dead, and he goes, "Hello."
Oh, jeez.
I love that as a
is
kid.
Harsh.
I put this in the Hall of Fame because, I mean, it was in 2,580 newspapers and journals. It had the Guinness World Record for being the world's most widely syndicated comic strip. And Garfield has spawned merchandise, just merchandise, earning $750 million to $1 billion annually.
Wow.
This is a monolith of comics. And it's one of those that, this is a very predictable comic. And I know that. But at the same time, it's almost comforting to read a Garfield strip and go like, oh, yeah, he likes lasagna a lot.
It's not even a very funny one, but it's familiar.
Yeah. And I feel like it doesn't make me laugh out loud as much anymore. But I read it to my kids or they read it and they enjoy it. Fun facts, by the way, the beginnings of it. Jim Davis actually did a comic strip called Norm Nat, which is about a bug. And it did okay, but then the people in charge said, no one can identify with a bug. And so he's like, okay, well, what can people identify with? And he's like, oh, people love cats and dogs. There's a lot of dog comic strips out there, not as many cats. So he made Garfield.
A sleepy, lazy cat.
He named him, and it gave his personality after his grandfather, James A. Garfield Davis, who he described as a large, cantankerous man. John Arbuckle was named after a 1950s coffee commercial for Arbuckle Coffee, I believe it was. Odie was actually originally John's roommate's dog. He had a roommate named Lyman.
Okay.
Lyman got written out, so he adopted him.
John killed him.
Maybe. Oh, speaking of which, you guys heard of Garfield minus Garfield?
Yes. It was really popular about 15 years ago.
Yeah,
Pre-meme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Garfield minus Garfield, someone took the Garfield strips and removed Garfield away.
Imagine the sketch that you talked about where he's yelling at Garfield, but no one took John's steak. He was just on the phone, and then he yelled something like that,
And that's
with
what it
no
is.
cat being there.
And sometimes it's like 3 panels, and it's like just him sitting there by himself and then saying nothing, doing nothing. And then the last panel, he's like, maybe I'll go outside. And it's one of those absurdist humor type things. But it did spawn a huge debate, actually, at my work of whether Garfield can be understood by John or not, whether John understands him or
because
not.
Odie couldn't speak, but Garfield could.
Yeah. And sometimes it would seem like John would respond to Garfield, but no. In fact, John does not understand what Garfield says.
In the cartoon, Garfield never moved his mouth.
No.
I think that was lazy animation as well.
Oh, that's probably
That was a little bit cheaper. The strip was originally called John, actually, and then they changed to Garfield.
Who cares
He
about
became a more
John?
central
Yeah.
character. And I don't know if you noticed this, Ken. If you read old Garfield versus new Garfield, Garfield definitely went through some sort of evolution because all of a sudden he began walking on 2 feet, got a little slimmer, a little taller in that regard.
Really?
And they did that. He says, well, they're talking to him like, why? And he said it's to make it easier to push Odie off the table or to reach for a piece of pie. Like it's much easier to have a fat cat that can stand up rather than just a real, more realistic fat cat.
Huh.
So yeah, I think that Garfield is one that Jim Davis still alive, but he only writes the idea and then does rough sketches, and someone else does it all for him. I shouldn't say all for him. Someone else colors it and makes it nice.
Yeah, okay.
But I feel like Garfield deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because people still know and love Garfield.
that merchandise, man.
It's it's one of the few on here that actually had an animated cartoon that worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Or
think,
at least part of it.
And
Yes.
2 very successful films.
live action CGI monstrosities.
Well, I still, for me, the imagery of Garfield, like all of those, like suction cupped to the cars,
Yeah.
windows,
Yeah.
that was huge in the 90s.
That orange tabby's everywhere. And
Yeah.
every time I eat lasagna, I think of Garfield.
Yeah, exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Why does a cat love lasagna so much?
I don't know. I really don't know. But actually, in fact, my daughter the other day, the day of this recording, she came in to say goodbye. She's going off to school, and she did flop down on the bed. Just goes, "Ugh, I hate Mondays." And I went, Garfield. So yeah. Anyway,
That's a great choice. Yeah, because I hadn't considered Garfield, and that is a great Hall of Fame choice.
Yeah.
Love
There you
it.
go. There's our picks. There's
Yeah.
12 comics.
Zach, how are you doing over there?
I am confused.
I was going to say, out of the ones we talked about, which ones do you remember actually hearing about?
I've heard about Dennis the Menace. I've heard about Doonesbury, but I don't get it because who does? The Far Side, Family Circus, Calvin and Hobbes, Peanuts, Garfield.
Okay, so a good smattering of it.
The big ones.
But let us know if we missed any comics you like. Let us know on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Because, hey, if you liked this random trip through nostalgia, we may do it again. Because there's plenty more to talk about.
We should just do live performances of readings of these panels.
Put that on Patreon.
Yeah.
Live readings. We'll just read the comics to you.
Wait a minute.
as dour as they do.
What's the Riverdale one?
Oh, that's
Archie?
Archie. Yeah.
Was that in the paper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part 2.
Not very good.
Save
but
it
yes.
part 2.
Okay.
But yeah, let us know if we have what ones are your favorites, and let us know what other categories we could do as well, because we always love doing these categories.
Absolutely.
If you like this, let us know.
Yeah. So before we go, we'd like to thank our patrons. So from the I Am the Listener category, we have Lady Terry A. Finley of Wigtonshire, Sweet Bottom Cakes, Jessica Drought, Sean Sandquist, Just Plain Old Kyler, Jennifer Kilkowski, Braden Winterton, Babs, Alicia Bass, Adrian Gray, Glow Clendaniel, Plot Twist Media, Adam and Rachel Crump, and Allison Gall. And from the Bacon Council, we have Nicole Deke Hale, Chris Anderson, Ryan and Marley Farron, Stephen Ross, Motts, Her Royal Highness Jessica Terry, our favorite couple, the Madsons, The Shadow, and Reverse Listener. Thank you, patrons, very much.
Thank you, patrons.
And thank you if you made it to the end of this episode.
You are awesome. But if you want to find me, you can find me at 76Joel on Twitter. You can find me performing with Quickwits. They're performing for free on Facebook online. For more details, go to qwcomedy.com or go to the Quickwits Facebook page.
If you want to find me on Twitter or Instagram, it's at Kenny3DD. If you want to read my movie reviews, it's ShowtimeShowdown.com.
If you'd like to connect with me, you can do so on Twitter and Instagram at Tumbling Mustard. But more importantly, make sure you're following Baconsale on social media. Go ahead and like that Facebook page, Baconsale, and then stop by Twitter and Instagram at Baconsale. While you're doing that, go to tpublic.com/Baconsale if you want to get yourself some merch, some good t-shirts and whatnot in the store. And then if you'd like to support the show even further, you can go to patreon.com/Baconsale, where support and additional content starts at just $3 a month. Woo-woo.
So until next time, thank you from all of us, and not me. That's the way my mind works.
That's how parody works.
Oh,
I thought of a clown doing.
No, hey, family friendly. Family friendly. Those were in waiting rooms.
no.
I hate them.
All the way back to the Biblia Papernum.
Pulitzer and Hearst, they think they got us. Do they got us?
No! You're anti-newspaper.
I am. Minimum effort. Yeah.
Save it for our font show.
Shahoma?
I just got my bedtime reminder.
Do you watch your mommy?
Yeah.
And who's your daddy?
My phone?
When a watch and a phone love each other very much.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
Join us, listener, as we take a completely visual medium to audio form.
See? It works when you explain it.
What you got there, sport?
Apple.
Let's keep going with explanations. Gasp and recoil.
What a terrible night for a curse.
The
Back
one
to
who loves
basics was
comics.
tier 2, though. Let's be honest.
Biting off more than I can chew isn't the problem. It's biting off more than I can work off.
Joel, I don't know if you get it yet.
I get it. God, what's the Exxon crisis? What's happening right now?
10.
What's going on?
What's in the Suez Canal?
And
You're going to ruin the Far Side.
a little bit. Local slam.
Oh, have you read Dune?
Have you read Doonesbury?
I think maybe Prince Valiant could be the greatest story ever told.
Can I wear my short sleeve pants?
Why did that get me so much?
That's it. Nobody
Yes.
likes a narc, sis.
A circus family I would watch,
but
not
a
Family Circus. I love and I fear them at the same time.
Chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. Ack.